Thank you, Christina. Thank you also, Anne, for having us, and also Nick for all your help. We'd also like to begin by thanking the Architecture League, not only for the last 29 years of this particular prize, but the last 129 years of the Architecture League's existence as well, for opening up exhibitions, opening up debate, dialogue. We've often been the audience member. And so now it's a great privilege to show you our own work as well, and how we've really been affected by the way of thinking and the way of operating as part of a larger community.
I feel like I'm going to do karaoke tonight. I'm just kidding. Thank you very much. We're actually blushing from that glowing introduction. I'm Marisa, this is Eric. Thank you very much for all our friends and supporters and collaborators who are here tonight. We, as mentioned, live and operate as ESKYIU, which is a play on Eric's name and my name, and we both lived and operate both in New York City and Hong Kong. Our name, ESKYIU, also means to askew, to twist, to challenge, and our main interest today right now is sensory media and how it challenges and experimentation with different scales of the public, and we'll run through some of those concepts. With a keen interest into ideas of machine digital production and handcraft human labor, and concepts of something we're trying to figure out today on ideas of social sustainability and what that actually means to various audiences. To just begin, again, Chinatown Work was actually something we did together, the first kind of real interactive installation in 2006. And this was actually funded by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, which really marks our issues dealing with workforces and labor issues that shifted primarily labor from Chinatown to China itself. And the production we're interested in the kind of cultural production, but also the architectural production of both unique and generic global spaces. This installation was in the corner of Bowery and Canal Street, and you know, both kind of the obsession since 2000, 2001. We've been filming a lot of these interiorized spaces in Chinatown. And this image is sort of the public interaction, and luckily we're able to convince the HSBC to give us their space down in Chinatown. Actually, HSBC returns quite a lot.
So this shows, it's a short video, and the video shows mediating between two conditions. There's an interior condition of a factory workspace, and then an exterior condition of just the street view. And so it's actually the space of your own body. You can see the silhouette of Marisa there and the silhouette of Marisa above. And as you pass in front of the screen, it's a real-time interaction. And so your body is becoming mapped with the space of labor below. And so you actually need to gather multiple people together. You need to gather a community together in order to be able to see the image below quite clearly. Otherwise, you just see a hand or a snippet of the different pieces of information that exist right below that level. And so this was a piece that we actually hand sewed as well.
And also working with different manufacturers, we often are limited by what's given to us, but we work with fashion designers. 3Form was a manufacturer that had eco-resin as materials that were reconstituted, so that appears quite a lot. And this is an image of the exterior of the installation itself. This leads to a project that we'll talk a little bit more in depth.
So this is a farming factory, and essentially it's a vertical production line. So they grew everything from growing their own cotton. This is in northern China, actually quite close to Afghanistan. And they're growing the cotton all the way down to the production, owning their own stores as well. So you can see also the sort of the feeder tubes to using quite modern methods to irrigate a field that wouldn't normally be able to grow quite as efficiently. These are some of the factory spaces, and you can see the spaces of production. This is one of the multiple buildings, and so this is just a snapshot going right down the line of that building in particular. This is a coal-burning plant that they built themselves. It's a much cleaner energy because it scrubs the waste before it comes out. than other coal-burning plants within China. But they're also cleansing their own water before it leaves the factory space. But it also chlorinates it. And so you have a fish, say, like that one, versus a fish like that one. And we're trying to generate ideas and schemes that will give us more, well, fatter fish.
So as a response, I suppose, to the reality of production and sort of what typically is deemed as, you know, in New York Times, we often see labor issues, uprisings lately, but how do we actually respond to the reality to make it more of a productive, kind of social, progressive model? Using sustainability perhaps not so much as only green, but for communities. So the reality of it, we try to respond to something new, be it a system, again, of greening, and how it would actually begin to recycle the use of water dye systems to the point of sale in New York City, for example. So this image represents some of the design facade systems we're working on, from, say, the worker dormitories that we've been actually investigating to the kind of showcasing of technology onto the exterior as a productive landscape. And this sort of brings us to a sort of site-specific installation for the Architecture League as a response. We have the resource vitrine, we're calling it, and a didactic diorama. Architects usually like to speak with a mouthful. And maybe you can describe a little bit of this.
So our interest in dioramas actually extend from the 19th century model of a diorama that appears in museums. What's fascinating about these type of dioramas, though, is that the spaces or even the size of the bear has become a lot shorter because of the trout population, the salmon population as well. So these become almost a memory of a landscape that no longer exists. It's a memory of a landscape that no longer, it's been overridden. And so in some case, we're also conscious of this. So we're providing a diorama for our factory space, but the factory space itself is acknowledging that it's taking up a lot of our global resources as well in order to make the clothes that we wear versus taking up the space that used to be actually wide open sort of landscapes.
So maybe after the lecture, we can examine our installation outside. This represents kind of an encapsulation of all our research collided into what we're calling this didactic diorama, showcasing of research and projects in farming factory in southern China to other installations that we'll speak a little bit about. What's really been a fun project is to combine our kind of inquiry and research of LED lighting, sensory media, the concepts of sort of materiality, the obsessive sort of hand crafting that we take for granted with physical hand labor, to the potentials of using what we've been calling this kind of scram idea of ramps and cooling systems, and of course mirroring as an effect between sort of, I suppose, mirrors as a sort of narcissistic material, as an authority material, comes up a lot in some of our recent studies, and how we then situate installation within the context of the gallery here. The object becomes extremely solid during the day, and slowly, due to its sort of disintegration with the lighting and the facade, and at night it begins to illuminate within the presence. That sort of mimics this idealized community that we're trying to propose in this sort of farming factory concept. The sort of ideas were to think of a way to both reveal and also conceal, which are often conditions that we're interested in the sort of material effects and sensory effects. The moment that kind of juts out from the vitrine is where you hopefully all get to kind of peep into and test how, in one sense, the vitrine itself extends the landscape in a modular kind of systematic way, but at the same time allows us to have the sort of hallucinating effect that the two-way mirror system begins to build.
And so you can also see a sensor, and the sensor measures your proximity, basically, to the vitrine itself. And so your own presence allows you to see a little bit clearer into the vitrine. Or if you move further back, it actually conceals it a bit as well. So we always want to have this also sense of your own presence within these projects as well. This also is just a quick image of a factory prototype, and you can see the 4 cooling towers using, again, a passive cooling system within the factory space. But it also is proposing different fruit trees, and the fruit trees both provide the shade and sort of shelter for the workers, but it also provides literally the fruit as well. And so we're sort of pairing different modes of production together and combining them into one.
So these are sites that we've been visiting in the last few years, a 250,000 factory compound from actually quite progressive manufacturers with organic farming, and how we then look at these mass labor and how, the kind of cycles of consumption, and actually the also provisions of these really incredible festival spaces to bring in the family and the community networks into the factory complexes, which are actually contemporary villages in their own right. This leads to, we often kind of jump back and forth and collaborate a lot in the Oakland platform. And this was a project called Nutritious and an aeroponic facade, a little bit different to hydroponics. But this was actually done with some students at the Architecture Association when we were teaching earlier.
And so this project was also borrowing some of the prototypes that we learned from China and actually reapplying it back into London in this case. So we were working with our AA students and also Green Fingers. Green Fingers is a aeroponic system. They're manufacturers. And it turns out there's 2 major sources of sort of aeroponic research. One is NASA, because in the space station it's hard to develop food. The other one happens to be people who do illicit drugs, because it's hard to grow things out in the open. And so we're sort of borrowing some of this technology for our own installation. But for our own installation, instead of hiding it away, we actually form a facade of it as well. We also use, this is a 3-4 material. The 3-4 material is called 100%, and so it's all post-consumer waste. It's basically our shampoo bottles and other things. We also use another one of their products for this particular piece, and that was post-industrial waste as well. And they made a promise that when we grew sick of it and sort of tired of the design, that we can always send it back to them. And then they'll just delaminate it and then melt it down again and then form a new product. So once this product in particular has entered even the waste stream, it's reused again and again indefinitely as well.
So for the opening, again, site-specific. So we had strawberries growing aeroponic for the British tradition. So we like to try that. So I think continuation of Nutritious, in one sense it would be interesting to actually be able to eat the facade, but our major laboratory now is looking at 2 dense cities, which is Hong Kong and New York. But just as an overview, we have been obsessed with the kind of density. I think there's 7,500 skyscrapers in Hong Kong, and I think predominantly the largest population of people living above 14th floor in the world is known to be the world's sort of most vertical city. And in this kind of complex density, besides the sort of generic tenement buildings, there are a lot of issues of conservation to development and actual natural systems that we're looking at.
So a great deal, this is an image of Hong Kong, by the way. A great deal of Hong Kong is actually just raw nature. In fact, if you look at a land use map of Hong Kong, you'll find that approximately 75% is actually open parkland, and actually a great deal more is actually used for dedicated towards nature as well. So really Hong Kong as a built environment is very small percentage is actually used for the residents. What you get is a very vivid split. You have on one hand just open nature. On the flip side, you'll have really dense populations living really packed together. And so we're starting to rethink that as a proposition.
Yeah. So could it be possible to actually, and I think there is a current research on a lot of greening, but greening actually has been prevalent, I think, in many cities. This is actually my uncle, who is a guerrilla urban gardener who's been gardening for 30 years with a microfarm in Hong Kong, published a book on urban gardening that's formed some of our own research and inspiration. And what's interesting is his 35 square meters of farm can feed his family of 4. And we've been adopting these ideas into not only a horizontal platform, perhaps vertical landscape of extending. And hopefully our dream is to take over HSBC in Hong Kong, which is from a lot of his research or statements and manifestos since the 80s that has been touting this sort of 1983 building as the most original kind of atrium space of vertical. We actually convert that into the facade to upgrade his design intent from the 80s, and a way to then deal with translucency or maybe transparency through greening. And with, I suppose, a Norman Foster facade, Eric took this amazing photograph from the back kind of hill topography through into the HSBC, and we applied then another layer of effects through lighting. And what's been actually another way to rethink some of these spaces is the atrium, the underbelly that was not anticipated, is every Sunday used as like a domestic helper. Filipino maids congregate as their public space and how they reclaim. And these issues of public space and publicness is something that we're attempting to understand a little bit more. So the corporate and the informal situated in one single space.
So this was a project that we did for the Venice Biennale, representing Hong Kong. This is the Hong Kong Pavilion. And so really, we were growing very local vegetables, essentially. And what the Hong Kong palette might enjoy, we actually reconfigured for Venice itself. So instead of growing bok choy, we decided to grow rosemary instead. But we did combine a bit. This is a Chinese lantern as well. And then with that, we also, you can see there's some rosemary within the planters themselves. The structure is just there to hold up this particular exhibition. In reality, we'd like to hang this off buildings. And so we'd use the actual structure from the buildings themselves. And also the planters in this particular case could move up and down to allow for harvesting. In addition, this is basically, this is one of our favorite gardeners. She went with us not only to pick the plants, pick her favorite food, but also to plant with us and also to harvest as well, and take care of and tender our plants as well while we were away, essentially. But we really see this involvement always like with the local community as well. This is a project called Linear Landscapes, and we want to take some of these same ideas back into Hong Kong as well. So learning from what we're studying for the Biennale to also make new proposals. This is a highway running through the city for which we would actually like to cover. And what we would do is we'd take 2 forms of covering. On the inside, it would be essentially moss and also an algae that eats CO2 very well, very efficiently. On the outside, it would be another type of habitat. In this case, it was a noise barrier. And the noise barriers in Hong Kong are really specially designed huge transparent sheets of glass, which the birds just hit into. And then, so instead of injuring the birds, our interest was to provide a habitat for the birds instead, to allow for more biodiversity back into the city, and also have and share resources back into the city as well. And so really we have a great deal of interest in also not designing just for ourselves, but actually designing for the greater community around us.
And Heirloom, actually, just quickly, is a project we're currently working on, which is a series of tomato investigations for a private estate in Hong Kong, actually, where The Man with a Golden Gun with James Bond was filmed back in the 60s. So it has this great cultural legacy. But what's really amazing is this private estate has been undergoing a lot of kind of preservation and development pressures, but we're hoping to work with a team of architects, designers, and also the owner of the private estate to turn it into a public park. So these are kind of major questions we have about the role of the architect in itself and how it can transcend sort of policy or issues. And furthering on with yeah.
A similar idea for this project. This was a project in Tokyo, and where we were proposing to stacking basically public parks within a fashion museum. And the brief didn't actually call for any parks whatsoever, but we decided that we'd actually want to give back to the city as well, so that by building a building there, we're actually contributing in a different way to not just the architectural form, but in a very dense district. You can probably see where you are if you orient yourself closely. So a very dense district, we'd actually like to have much more open space, and maybe the only way we can gain open space is by just building another building.
And it's interesting because we had a roundtable last Tuesday with all the winners and speakers from this year's 2010 Architecture League about ideas of participation and collaboration. And often, you know, we do look at our city to encourage types of participation. This is actually a class called Politics of the Object that have been looking at street markets in Asia and also relates to a lot of issues happening in Chinatown and New York City. And these were ways to engage the public with critical questions about the kind of future development of areas that are slowly removed and erased by development. So there were 21 students building different types of kind of playful but critical ways of examining what we do in our cities today in the Graham Street. One lyrical one, which is more about a countdown to its destruction, and also just the ideas of approaching often other types of migrants or immigrants within the city to learn more about the fabric itself. And most of the objects that were built were interactive. This sort of engagement and kind of collaboration, we often work with a lot of Federation youth groups and learning from other friends in New York City and collaborating like with People's Architecture. We managed to get Lego to sponsor 250,000 Lego bricks with 300 students building their ideal cities. And this is something as a tool of engagement, both playful and also dissemination of, you know, students, teachers, and various different organizations. And I think this is kind of our final project. I know we were only given 25 minutes. We're at 22.05. And we do want to end with kind of a larger challenge that we were faced last year. We were selected actually as curators for the Hong Kong side of the Hong Kong Shenzhen Bi-City Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism, very long mouthful, in a very interesting site called the West Kowloon Cultural District, or the future West Kowloon Cultural District. So Eric, myself, Alan Lowe, and Frank Yu were a team of 4. We were selected last July and opened the show in December. Under certain constraints, but a really incredible reclaimed land that has been empty for over 10 years as the background of our cultural production and experimentation.
So part of the idea behind the Biennale too was to really engage with the city. And so this is a film that we worked on together with some of our students as well. And the basic idea to the film was to really promote the event. But the way that we did it is we used images in the public domain, or any clips or small clips in the public domain, as the base. And so we use the Creative Commons laws, and which is basically giving away certain copyright law to anyone who wants to use the images. And it sort of controls different ways. You can give away more or hold back less of the copyright for the image. And as part of this process, we also made sure that the film that we create, we also attribute to the people who gave the images, but also when we put it back out in the public domain, we allow it to also take on this idea that other people could use it for their own creative work too. And so really it's building this sense of awareness within our own students, but also back to the community where we grab the images from, the resources from.
And that makes us also rethink the kind of discipline or practice of architecture. How to engage the masses. Probably this is the second time the Biennale has happened in Hong Kong. So the challenge was to work with sort of bilingual platform, both with a community in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and also international architects, such as I think Dan Wood was involved in the Biennale in Shenzhen side. So city mobilization was a Shenzhen theme. The Hong Kong theme was BYOB. It sounds a little bit funnier in Cantonese, but BYOB was to kind of make it a tagline to open up to audience, and we themed it with as many bees as we can. So we opened the dictionary and created within our own office a series of bees. So you bring your own banana, you bring your own baby, you bring your own beetroot for a farming event, bento box, and also it translates into different languages. We produced kind of what we called a catalog in progress. Due to 5 months of preparation, we didn't have time for real production, so this was produced in, I think, less than a week with essays and graphics and production. We originally wanted to call it Instant Biennale, kind of like eating ramen. It's delicious and fast, but we ended up calling it BYOB. This actually is interesting as a backdrop, just to give you an idea. We invited also street artists, give them certain briefs, work and collaborate with them. We actually were very fortunate to have Shigeru Ban design the main pavilion out of paper tubes, which relates to a lot of the issues that we've been examining in various ways. And these are just certain shots of the preparation and the details of the structure itself. That actually was originally 30 meters by 30 meters, but had to be reduced. We invited certain artists, for example, Su Bing, who has this forest project, who teaches little kids to draw trees, which in the end inspired his own production and to his own calligraphy, and to raise money to build forests in various places in Africa and China itself.
This was an iPhone orchestra, the first iPhone orchestra in Hong Kong. We all learned how to, this is actually a photo by me. I was also a participant in most of the events, actually. And this is we all brought our iPhones, and basically we received a score sheet. So those of us who don't even play instruments could learn how to perform. And so we also drew a crowd. So in the same day that we were rehearsing, we were also performing later in that day as well. So the general idea too is to always have debate, to really form different types of discussion under and use the pavilion. So we invited all the master planners. There's 3 master planners who are in competition for the site as well, for the West Kowloon Cultural District, as they call it. One of them is this person, Rem Koolhaus, and Norman Foster is another, and there was also Rocco Yim, a local architect. And so we're really encouraging debate within as well. This was a yoga event that was held on site, and it also faces, you can see it faces Hong Kong Harbor. These are some other slightly younger members of the audience who also decided to participate.
And also from the young to the old, we organized an event called the Poon Choi event, working with elderly organizations to raise money for certain nonprofits. And what was really quite fascinating was the institutes, the architects, all kind of raised funds, and we actually had 2,000 elderlies with 210 dining tables eating communally with this kind of communal bowl eating fest pre-Chinese New Year. So it was a really activating kind of issues of social mobilization and also people's role in the production of cities. And we, of course, had the opportunity to meet a lot of new young architects like ourselves and also encourage the discussions of certain things of interest.
So this was actually a project that we did for we commissioned an artist, but he also brought friends of his who happened to be a lawyer and a filmmaker, as well as an architect. In this one, it was sort of overtaken by students. These are students from a local fashion institute, and so they made you can see they made their dresses from basically recycled found materials that they found throughout. And you can see that this became actually a theme. We didn't ask them to come. They actually showed up and participated in the most perfect way. This structure was on the site, and it was made from 200,000 recycled paper cartons as well. So really, not just through our own initiative, but through the way of thinking, everyone actually independently, more or less, participated within these systems. So you can see actually how some of these systems are changing over time. There wasn't just one green wall, this is one, but you can actually see another one that didn't survive so well in the background. You can also see the Austin Mergold's installation as well. They were here last week. And so we were also spanning oceans as well to bring people across. This was a local graffiti artist who also worked very closely with the local architects to form some of these pieces. This table in particular was a piece that was designed by an Italian designer who couldn't stay for the whole Biennale. So it was actually cut by a CNC machine by our students. So our students were actually the hand of the forming the piece, although he was a designer working in Italy, basically giving instruction about how to form that piece. So again, trying to bridge gaps, bridge locations.
So yeah, there's just a few more images of various types of installations. And often what we forget or we hoped is the sort of unexpected nature of how architecture can perform became wedding shoots and many things we learned about Hong Kong City and how it's actually used to actually was very surprising. Interactive models, further projects by other designers and also inventors who are trying to provoke the concepts of wind energy. And we managed to get Nike. This is to be a sponsor. So we hosted a three-way football match with various communities and also structures dealing with materials such as bamboo, LED lights. And then we just heard, yeah, there was a celebrity who just had a music video done here. And talking about crossing cultures.
This was a DJ booth, but also if you see on the left-hand side, there's a person cooking something between Cantonese food he was a Korean cook, so also / with Korean food as well. So we also brought DJs and music events throughout the time period. And again, it's an incredible venue with Hong Kong just right behind as well.
And one of the issues we've been also thinking about is the domesticity. We had Casey Wong, who produced a 4-foot by 4-foot paddling home, which became a massive performance event in the harbor, slightly legal and illegal, with another boat project by Stanley on a more pastoral counterpart of these issues of urban and pastoral, furthering in the harbor. And we're very glad he survived. And the sort of last kind of few slides before we wrap up is another project by Douglas Young. This is a West Kowloon Wall City. So we've been very interested now to rethink how the kind of commercial and the informal act together in a city landscape as larger questions of informal communities. And often other people begin to appropriate the issue of public washrooms into a public space. But to end, just a few slides that kind of capture the Biennale became a real experimentation on events-based project, kind of rethinking how we kind of play a role in the city. And what's nice was this is the Eco Farm Pixel by Metaphor. We invited various participants, again, another few hundred students who harvested it in November. You can see the Shiguruban Pavilion being erected simultaneously. We had a harvesting your own salad event in January. And then we ended up with on February 27th, the last day, a kind of a bring your own patch of green home to redomesticate this kind of patch of biodegradable farm for the students to take care and nurture in their own sort of apartment space.
So this was our client for this project. She's a very demanding client, relentless, and we stayed on budget, on time as well. But she was also a very pleased client. She kept coming back to the site almost every day to partake. Almost rain or shine, she was there. And really what we were trying to do, provide a backyard. Hong Kong, as you had seen in the earlier images, there's not that many backyards. You're either in the nature or you're the dense city. And so what we're trying to do is provide a backyard for everyone right in the center of the city. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.